Content warning. This episode contains spoilers for all of Westworld Season 1, discussion of murder, discussion of sex, brief mention of bodily mutilation, several mentions of suicide, discussions of Gamzee and Vriska, discussion of imperialism, colonialism, racism, and slavery, and discussion of non-consensual actions, specifically mind control. Should you choose to watch the show, there will also be an additional content warning for sexual assault that we didn't discuss. Also, I just wanted to let you know up front that we are going to be wrapping up Season 1 of Will It Homestuck by the end of November or beginning of December or so. Myself, Jonaya, Minty from past episodes, Momo of Act 8, and Daft of Alpha Halcyon Epsilon are organizing a leftist speculative Homestuck visual novel set on Earthsea called New Game Plus that is moving into the early stages of development. What this means for the podcast is that after the season concludes, I will not be appearing on new episodes of Will It Homestuck until 2021. We'll still be releasing community episodes as people decide to do them, but I kind of need the time to write a lot of words about exactly how egalitarian and solarpunk I think Earthsea should be. I'm hoping to take a 2-month break and come back around the first anniversary of the podcast. Thank you all so much for a fantastic first year, and keep it blending, I guess?
He looks like British Todd Howard. Sorry, but that's what we got, isn't it?
Westworld, published by Bethesda. That's confirmed now.
What, did you get your Westworld patch?
Your horse just kind of clips through the ground and starts spinning around.
I'm a player piano version of a 2000s pop song.
I'm the law around these parts, partner.
And I'm 3 Nacodiles in a trench coat.
And welcome to Will It Homestuck, a podcast where we put media in the Homestuck blender to see what comes out. I'm Bucky Grant. I use he, here, and they, them pronouns, and you can find me at raddifferent on Twitter.
I'm Rif, they, them, he, him. You can find me at Antlered Council on Twitter and Skeletorific on Tumblr.
And I'm Jonaya. I use she, her pronouns, and I can be found at altuniversewash on Twitter.
This week, we are covering Westworld, which is an HBO original television show that aired in, I believe, 2015, 2016?
2016, I believe.
2016. We're specifically looking at the first season this time because there are 3 seasons out, but they are detailed and dense enough that we are just gonna focus on the first one for now. We inevitably will revisit this because we had a fucking blast with it. And Jonaya, who is one of our patrons, is also suggested this particular topic because it is a show she likes, and I was initially skeptical because I knew it as that cowboy show that a couple chuds I knew liked, but it turns out that it is not just that. Let's describe what the hell is going on in this here television show.
Oh, good goddamn.
We're introduced to the titular Westworld, a park whose premise is allowing rich assholes to be disgusting, abusive people under the guise of a kind of Wild West living history amusement park. Guests are immersed in this world in part thanks to the hosts, synthetic humans who are programmed to respond in various ways to the actions of the guests in order to lead them on various escapades. The hosts are theoretically non-sentient. Hold on to that thought, because it will become important shortly.
Guests in Westworld can basically do whatever they want. The hosts are physically prevented from seriously harming them, and all narrative elements ultimately center around their immediate desires.
Our first character is Dolores, a host who plays the role of a rancher's daughter in Westworld. We see her go about her day and interact with Teddy, another host who is programmed to be a kind of guide for the guests, and also has a storyline that intersects with Dolores's in many ways. It is quickly shown that the hosts have certain predetermined storylines they're a part of, which in Dolores's case includes the brutal murder of her family every night. At the end of the first day we're shown, we encounter another major character, the enigmatic Man in Black, who is a right bastard of the worst sort.
At the end of every day, the hosts are retrieved and repaired before being put back onto the program's loops. They are programmed to not recognize sights from the outside world, as well as to ignore topics of conversation that deviate from their view of the world. But Dolores' father finds a photograph on the ground and is able to see what it represents, showing us glimpses that the hosts are more sentient than intended.
As time goes on, we're introduced to the other major hosts. Maeve, the madam of the local brothel, Hector, the roguish outlaw, Lawrence, the ne'er-do-well member of the local Mexican resistance, and a variety of racial stereotypes that purport to represent the native population of the United States. The entirety of Westworld is clearly based on the very British, very racist version of history espoused by its surviving founder, a man named Robert Ford. Not history, but a story told in place of it.
We see the journeys of several characters, hosts and humans alike, as they move through their daily routines.
Looking behind the scenes in the park, we get to meet some of the staff. Bernard, the man responsible for overseeing the hosts, Teresa, the head of operations, Ashley, in charge of security, and Lee, the head narrative writer. We're also introduced to the slaughterhouse-like conditions that comprise host processing, where hosts are hastily put back together after the guests tear them apart.
In a parallel narrative from that of the Man in Black, we see a man named William and his supposed friend and definite co-worker, Logan, who wants to introduce him to the wonders of the park. William is initially reluctant, to contrast the very enthusiastic and very horny behavior of Logan, but becomes interested in what's happening in the park, deciding to go on a bounty hunting quest. He eventually runs into Dolores and is obviously quite taken with her.
Following the Man in Black, we see that he has become weary with the game of the park and wants to find something called the maze that he believes will lead to a deeper level of the game. He seeks the maze with the unwilling help of Lawrence.
Maeve's journey shows her becoming aware of what's happening behind the scenes and forcing the staff to increase her self-awareness until she's able to escape from the park. She ultimately wants to be able to get outside and experience the world beyond the park, and goes so far as to burn her body in order to undergo a complete rebuild just to leave.
It becomes clear that something more is happening with Westworld staff. Data is being smuggled out of the park, and it turns out that this is happening on behalf of the Delos Corporation, who surprisingly don't especially trust the weird British racist that has threatened to destroy all the park's intellectual property. The Delos board sends their executive director, a woman named Charlotte Hale, to oversee Ford stepping down.
Ford has been working in secret on a hidden new narrative, sprinkling hints of a villain named Wyatt throughout the park. We see that Teddy's sparse backstory has been augmented to include the story of Wyatt, Teddy's former sergeant who got lost in the desert and came back with some strange ideas.
We learned a number of intertwined secrets. Ford has built a copy of his family in secret in the park and has a hidden lab to make hosts. Bernard is actually a host himself, a copy of the park's deceased co-founder Arnold. Arnold was killed before the park opened, and we learned that it was Dolores who killed him.
The parallel story of Will and Logan shows Will becoming increasingly invested in the game, eventually choosing to abandon his friend, who, let's face it, kinda deserved it, and fully immerse himself. We're shown in a reveal that Will is the Man in Black. The story has been playing with time fuckery the whole time. The maze that Will sought for so long is revealed to only be a metaphor to help center the hosts.
Maeve, along with the help of Hector and a few others, has been able to get behind the scenes with full awareness of what's happening, and is planning to get out no matter what. They shoot their way out, and Maeve is about to leave when she changes her mind and turns back to go find the daughter that she was given at one point.
Wyatt is revealed to be a protocol that was built for Dolores, the oldest host, which just kind of makes her go full murder mode. She was the one who killed the other hosts and Arnold in the beginning, and Ford has something else planned for her. That something is revealed to be her killing Ford and kicking off a host rebellion in the park.
The season ends with the hosts killing guests and everything in chaos, leading us directly into the second season of the show.
With that established, with the first season of the show established, I guess we can sort of have our discussion about what the axis of the show revolves around. And we sort of talked off air before this. Our conceptions of what the aspect axis of this
piece of media is kind of also tie heavily into the class specs of Robert, Ford, and Arnold, who, in case you missed it, sort of Arnold and Ford's relationship is important for particularly how Ford thinks of Arnold's important to the way that he created the park and the way that it plays out. So that they're kind of, you kind of can't talk about what the story's about without talking about the two of them.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
Put another way, they're the master classes. Like, we've got some master classes here, and these are it.
Yeah,
Yup.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's when you have master classes, they tend to be of the aspects that the story's about, as it turns out.
So I don't think we're going to have a lot of disagreement about their classes then.
Well,
I guess we'll see who gets
Maybe,
who.
yeah.
Who gets which.
I have some intense thoughts. All right, so I'm gonna do a little preamble here for Ford. Ford is an aging capitalist who at this point has no real world outside of his own creation. Literally everything he is now invested in the core of his own narrative, his life, his childhood, and even his death. He has a philosophy of propagation that's almost grotesque. To him, continued existence is its own good, which is why he apparently has no issues just remaking his own friend and keeping him in a reboot state of memories. Present at every facet of the characters' lives, on every level, building his own world, he has associations with wealth, with power, and with absolute thrall. I classify him as a lord of life. And for Arnold, while his physical presence in the story is negligible, he is felt at every step, haunting the storyline. The one element the Lord cannot ever fully account for and cannot wrench back into his preconceptions. While he is drawn to creation, it is primarily about forging individuality from systems, with the mechanism by which he does that being suffering. To Arnold, suffering and pain and trauma are at the core of existence. Everything centers around the worst day and how you move from there. His presence is heralded by breakdowns, by deaths where none should be possible, and he is an inspiring presence for the characters he interacts with most frequently. I classify him as a muse of doom.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Ford's he's haunted by his past. It's something mysterious in the beginning, but his past is sort of like I think Arnold actually built the kid versions of the younger versions of Ford's family for him, but Ford fixed them and made them more quote unquote lifelike. Arnold left out Ford's father's alcoholism, but Ford added it back. Ford basically, he lives on what I noted down as a slave plantation in the park and outside of it, or at least I think the place where he met Teresa for lunch was inside the park too, but it read more as like where Ford lived than part of the park. It was artificial, but not part of the tourist attraction, I guess.
It was like an older part of the park, because she mentioned being there when she was like a little girl.
Yeah. He seems to think of himself as a god. Like, I don't think that the story's particularly subtle about that. He recreated his partner to be his assistant after said partner couldn't handle enslaving sentient beings and killed himself. This dude has control issues. He wants to be in control of literally everything. And he, an undeniably British man, goes out of his way to create not one, but at least two highly romanticized versions of a past that he can play in. He literally creates his own world to exploit. Westworld is very detailed and very believable, but it isn't there to be a faithful recreation. It's meant to be a playground for the rich to fantasize about there being even less negligible consequences to their actions. Ford deals in life and death, seemingly above both, right up until he orchestrates his own death, suicide by android. He is so associated with inevitable death and omnipresent tragedy and looming deadlines. He's the man technically in charge of the park, even if he is being ousted, and forces people to spend a lot of time working around him. He's essentially an inconvenience for a lot of the people trying to quote unquote get things done for the benefit of the Delos Corporation. Ford spends a lot of time trying to be as good of a creator as his counterpart Arnold, but can never quite reach what his partner did, even after making a copy of him. There's undeniable capitalist shit going on with Ford, and I can see why you gave him life, but I did give him time.
That's fair. Like, saw him and immediately thought, there's some Lord English happening here. To what degree, I'm uncertain.
It had to do with the inevitable death. Like, life has the implications of the creation, of the capitalism, of, like, growth, but he has too much to do with, like, things coming to an end for me. Like, he's when we see him, he's like, like, when I started to rewatch the first season, I could kind of go, oh, this dude's, like, preparing for his death the whole first season. Like, everything he's doing, he's sort of setting himself up for this, because this has been his grand machination all along. Like, the reveries are the last update he needed to get things in place for his own death. And I think the story has to operate on an axis of time and space, because it sort of just slaps you in the face the whole time with, like, hey, the story's about life and death, about, like, the consequences of creation and destruction, and particularly the consequences of man-made creation and destruction, and when the people who are doing the creating are fallible in a very direct and applied way, and, like, that not that sense of it being applied, and, like, Dr. Ford isn't a distant creator. He's hands-on. He's moving through the park himself. He's like, he has his thumbs and fingers in all the pies of, like, digging out the park. Maybe not physically, but he goes out there to look at it. He orchestrates his own death. All of the hosts are deliberately created and maintained. They can be harmed, but they can't actually die until they're planned to be deactivated and discarded. This Westworld strikes me as a story that's very similar thematically and in some senses in structure to Homestuck. So I just straight up was like, yeah, it's time and space. I gave Arnold Muse of Space. He has sort of, the Muses have their one significant entry point to the story, and, like, for Arnold it's his Dolores and sort of his connection to the system that governs all of the hosts. He inspires and commands the mistakes and small things that causes the hosts to grow and make them sentient. Has a lot to do with planned creation, not just the literal creation of the hosts and their sentience, but with essentially inspiring Dr. Ford to continue his work. And Ford couldn't even finish the project properly without creating a copy of him, but was still never quite able to achieve the same mastery of creation. It's, because I think Maeve is old, but it's Dolores, the oldest Arnold made host, that's the host that we focus on achieving sentience.
I agree with Bucky on the axis of the story. I have them as time and space, respectively, although I actually went in a slightly different direction as far as their classes. I do have them as Muse and Lord, but I have them flipped. So we don't see as much of Arnold. Like, we don't physically get to know as much about his whole process, although from what little we do know, he had a very active role in the creation of the initial foundation of the park. Like, it's commented that he's the one that wrote most of the host code. So, like, as Bucky pointed out, like, a lot of the stuff that Ford does is founded on his active creation, whereas Ford is more of this sort of, like, he's riding off of what was built for him. And also I have another angle I think supports the aspect of him as a muse, which is that while he is inspired by Arnold, Ford actually spends his entire arc essentially setting things up to inspire the hosts to be able to rise up. Like, everything he does, like, yes, it's in service of him ultimately killing himself, but, like, the only thing he does for the future is to set things up so that the hosts can achieve final sentience and then rise up against the humans, which, as he sees it, I think is an act of being free. It's not necessarily about, like, rebellion or killing humans. It's about them finally being able to make a choice. Whereas Ford takes an extremely, like, for all he does, he almost takes a passive role in the story. Like, he kind of, like, takes the stuff that other people do and sets it up, or he adds a little couple of things that set pieces in place that lead to other things happening. Like, he doesn't he doesn't directly do that much. Like he does a lot to support that, and he does do some very active things in support of his goals, but like narratively, he's like a dude that's very linked to his own past and is kind of like consumed by it. But then he's like putting all these little pieces in place for the host ultimately to be able to attain sentience and then attain free will. So I saw super heavy time coding. Like he's just steeped in it. Like his whole thing, like even the way he dresses like he's one of the guests in the park all the time. I believe he's the only member of the staff who always dresses like he's in the Old West. You know, he has his little hidey hole where the recreation of his family is, and he spends a bunch of time. So like he's definitely got a lot of that time player coding. And also in the other direction is that he's setting things up for the future with the hosts. But I saw him giving me very, very strong muse vibes, and that kind of like inspirational passive facilitation. Like he gives me really strong like alt Calliope feelings, to be honest. And Arnold is a more active, like he took control of his own narrative. Like even where he realized I can't do this anymore, he was actively like, no, I'm gonna have Dolores kill all these hosts and kill me, because if I'm gone, then this whole thing dies. Except that it didn't work like that, because Ford was there to kind of keep things going along. And I think that I see Arnold as the space, kind of like prototypical space player, like prototypical creation, active creation. So I have Arnold as the Lord of Space, and I have Ford as the Muse of Time in that particular pairing.
I think that is a good case, though, for the Muse Lord flipping.
Yeah, I'm definitely sold on that.
All right. But to get into aspects, so there's two reasons why I got keyed into the Life Doom coding. One is just Ford's relationship with Arnold immediately read to me like the Condess and the Psionic. Like this idea of like, actually, you don't get to die because I haven't said you could yet. You are like, I'm going to extend you long past the point where you actually wanted to be around. I'm going to keep you here because your life is still valuable to me. Which ties into a broader point. So time and space are about creation and death. They're about like the birth of something new leading into the decay into demise. So they're about life and death as we typically understand them out in the world. My argument is essentially that Life and Doom are about life and death as game mechanics. Like, to me, life players are not really concerned with life in like the sense that they're not really concerned with like creating new things or like building stuff. Like, they're very much associated with the status quo. To me, a life player is there is still more to do, so here is your extra life. It's this idea of like we are extending it into we still have like further things to gain from this, which is how it ties into capitalism for me. We still have more that we can profit off of, essentially. So Mina extends lives long past their actual due date by sending all the ancestors to the dream bubbles. Beffrey does the same thing for her party members. Jane is less explicit with this, but she does grant extra lives to her dead comrades through her powers as a maid. And so I do agree that life and death are, like, as concepts, are very crucial to Westworld, but I think for the vast majority of our characters, death is not this kind of ending. It is a setback. It is a step back in the game that we are all playing.
That's a really fucking cool analysis. One thing I will say is, like, again, I try to avoid doing the thing where I draw from like later seasons of the show and how it develops. But like one thing that we do start to see, and you get little bits of it, is like all of this is happening, and like Westworld is a very like game construct-y kind of environment. Like it almost could be like its little suburb session on its own. Like it's got its own little rules and stuff. But there's a much bigger world outside that we're like shown little bits of. And I would argue that like what Ford did goes way beyond the game construct and out into like the entire world. Like what he unleashes is a fundamental change in literally everything. And that is supported by stuff in later seasons. But I think you can make the argument just from what we're seeing in this season. Like there's clearly, like, shit has changed dramatically by the end of the season, and like, you know, that just continues to go on that trajectory. So I think that, I don't know, I still see him more as a time player. Like, you've got so much of that, like, timeline of the entire world kind of thing going on, and like all of society, and like how he ties into like the Delos Corporation and what they're doing with the data, which they don't talk about in this season, but it is implied that it's something critical. So I don't know, I'm still, God, I wish there was some way we could do like a dual aspect thing.
Yes, there is. What could we discuss of as like role play, and what could we discuss of as what's underneath? Because there is, I don't know to what extent Ford is a character who like seems to be hiding, like he's not necessarily hiding things about his true intentions so much as he's delaying when you find out about them.
Have we ever had master classes like roleplay each? Like, I am thinking a little bit about like Muse of Time role playing as a Lord of Life.
No, we haven't done that, but that's really fucking interesting.
Because like he's covering for the fact that he's scrambling to keep everything together, right? Because he didn't make any of the shit that actually works. He's just managed to keep it going for like 30 fucking years now.
I would absolutely be on board with the idea that he's role playing a Lord of Life within the confines of Westworld itself, because like he does kind of do that. Like he presents himself as being very in control. Like he threatens Delos to, you know, destroy their intellectual property. That's his leverage. Like he acts like he's got all his shit together, but everything he does is built off of what Arnold created, and he hasn't really like innovated so much as he's extended.
Like pretty much everything that he has, and like every like decisive action that he takes, like having Teresa killed, like orchestrating the host rising up, he has to use other people to do that for him. So I kind of like the idea of him presenting as this extremely active player when actually he's very passive and he has to work with other people.
And the time things, a lot of the time coding is sort of secret. Like he doesn't advertise that he's going to hang out with the fake version of his family. He just sort of like, that's just something he kind of just does as a part of his experience there, and literally nobody knows about it until they discover it later. A lot of the like, yeah, the like role-playing Lord of Life could sort of tie into creating Bernard, but it's still a sense of like, it still ties into his past, his need for nostalgia, his need for crutches from his past that he can use to inspire himself, that he can use to continue to create.
He does, like, at the end of the day, he's very like passive in a lot of ways. He's letting a lot of people do things for him, but that's not how he presents himself. And also a lot of the time coding stuff that I was using as an argument for his time coding is stuff that's not readily apparent. Like he's not like, hey, I'm gonna make all the hosts sentient and they're gonna kill a bunch of people and do a rebellion. Like he's just like, he's not talking about it at all. And then when he does it, it's more like, here, you're free now, do whatever you want. So yeah, I think that's, I'm on board with that, and that's a really cool interpretation that I don't think we've done before.
Well, I do like the idea of this guy realizing, shit, my lord is dead. I can't do this as a single masterclass. I gotta do it myself, I guess.
Yeah. Now, so Arnold, I guess, are we gonna have him role playing, or is he more like, we don't see as much of him? That's what makes him hard to analyze.
Let me run this through. I kind of like the idea of him not so much role playing a Muse of Doom as almost grimdarking into one, which grimdarking's going to come up later with my Dolores class effect.
Ooh.
But he has this encounter like with the suffering in his own life, and it completely twists him into, I have to inspire destruction in this park. I have to inspire death.
That's a good one. Yeah, that like a Lord of Space that whatever grimdarks into a Muse of Doom, because he does like that act. That act is like an act of inspiring control and creation. Like it does kind of kick off Ford's whole character arc, but also it's that one action where he allows Dolores to kill all the other hosts and then himself. Like that's not who he seems to be innately as a character, but he definitely got there, and the death of his son absolutely informed that. That's a cool theory. Yeah, I like that a lot.
All right, I think that does it for our Axis and Ford and Arnold aspects.
Yeah, it's on both time and space and life and doom, and they do both of the master classes because there's a lot of shit going on here. Hell yeah, fuck yeah. All right, so the next one that we had was the Man in Black, aka Will.
I had a lot of thoughts on him. He is obviously he ends up as a very like evil, depraved person. He really revels in the system that he's a part of. Like not just in the Westworld system, but in the whole system. Like he's a very rich dude with a lot of power and a lot of influence. And, you know, in his, I don't remember if he says it in this season. I don't want to like bring stuff in from later, but he mentions like, I do a lot of charity and stuff.
Yeah, he says that in this season.
He's a person that presents himself as being very like in control. But then when he lets that down, he's very depraved and very sadistic. And we see this whole like this long arc for him where he starts out with very apparently good intentions and then just kind of gradually gets more and more evil and bad. He's very cunning. He's very skilled at like what he does. He's not a good person though, like in any way. We don't see any kind of like redeeming qualities about him. He's just kind of an evil man. So the thing I know I'm making a lot of potential arguments. Like I was looking at him as maybe being kind of doom coded with this like systemic stuff going on. The thing I think that's kind of core to him is he's all about destruction. Like his actions are always either destroying somebody else or they're trying to lead to his own self-destruction. Like he specifically says he's looking for the maze so that he can find a deeper level of the game where the hosts can kill him. Like even when it's not about destroying someone else, it's about destruction. And then he's reveling in what's happening at the end. Like you see how happy he is when he sees that the hosts are like actually able to hurt him. So what I had for him, I think he's a page of rage. I think he starts off as an unrealized page of rage, and he's ending the story as a realized, like a fully realized page of rage. I think you can make the argument for him role-playing some doomy stuff, like especially in his life outside the park, but I didn't fully analyze it, so if one of y'all has doom coding, we can talk about that more. But I think at the end of the day, he's a fully realized rage page. And it rhymes too, which is neat.
Okay, so I had the same class. I also said page. I think his like going from having no power to like having an exponential amount of power inside and outside the park is very page. That's yeah. I have for him. When you're suffering, that's when you're most real. Like that's something that he seems to circle around a lot. His conception of what being a person is revolves around the bad experiences that you've had in your life, and at this point he wants to die. There's a lot of video game coding sort of thing going, like that's another reason that this vibes well with Homestuck is without explicitly being set in a video game. There's scenes where there's that particular scene when he's fighting the Mexican resistance where he with a pistol just picks off a bunch of different resistance members in a row in like a quick arc, and then he shoots another one through a wall, through like a plaster wall, and it's very video gamey. It's very video game protag. That's something that I had contrasting him and something Logan says. Oh, he refers to something as like an Easter egg, and like he throws around video game vocabulary while they're moving through the park. He has a conception of it as a game that he's sort of above. He's above going into all the narratives, and Will kind of has to drag him into it because Logan just wants to fuck. Whereas like eventually Will becomes that video game protag living in there in that system without kind of rising above it. He's just in it to win it. He says he guesses he just wants to find out what it means, like what the park means. He transitions to the Man in Black after leaving Dolores behind and taking his revenge on Logan. And then we don't see it, but he does go on to take over the corporation that owns Westworld. He was sort of in an underdog position that kind of rises over it. Internalizes the idea that he can also be in control, can also make his life what he wants by staying in Westworld. He's seeking out a real challenge, the host being able to fight back. He doesn't give a shit whether or not they're actually sentient. He's just tired of murdering people who are defenseless against him because it's boring now. He started out playing second fiddle to Logan in his own life. He couldn't even escape being Logan's brother-in-law while working for a company that Logan presumably had some power in before he was disposed of. Will goes on to become somebody who gets whatever he wants in the park, taking complete advantage of his position at the top of the system, journeying to the center and end of the park. His path from being a goody two-shoes trying to fill his place in a company to a man desperate for real challenge leads me to believe he is a page of doom who roleplayed as a knight of life before coming to his black hat moment. I think, like, he was serving Logan, and he was serving the needs of that company, and he was, like, there's sort of like betrothal vibes that I got from or arranged marriage sort of vibes that I got from Will and Logan's sister, and sort of this was like the bachelor party. This was the like, I'm getting to know my new brother-in-law before shit goes down, with the added bonus of like Will acted with obligation towards Logan's sister, but did not seem to really give a shit about her beyond that he had an obligation to her. I guess the last thing is, like, the pages kind of have that intense potential, and, like, his intense potential is to, like, take advantage of systems for his own benefit and get that very system to serve him.
I vibe with that. I vibe with the Page of Doom bit. I'm interested to hear Riff's thoughts.
I actually do really like Paige as like his actual class back. I'm probably going to end up saying role playing for a lot of characters here, but like just with the mechanics of how Westworld works, I don't think it's far off that a lot of them are role playing something, in that they are literally being demanded certain roles. So I class backed him as a Prince of Heart. I did assign him the Dirk. Because as a heart player, I know when there is a shitty heart player in the room, and the man just has all the telltale signs. So he's obsessed with this idea of true selfhood. Like this idea of like, the game is what is going to bring out my true self, and my true self is the actions that I perform in the game. I assigned him a prince partly because of that destructive potential both of you mentioned, but also just because, to me, princes take on the most pessimistic possible view of their aspect. Like, you see this with Eridan, you see this with Dirk, you kind of see it a little bit with Kurlaz, but that's more subtext. With, like, the most depressing outlook on my aspect is the one that is true, and I will not be swayed from it. So, I also just see him as splintering. He's trying to splinter himself very desperately. Like, in his mind, who I am in this theme park is not the same guy who I am out there. It's two completely different selves. But that's where I actually do like your idea of him being an actual page. He's just pretending to be a prince. Because what we find out is, no, everybody actually knew how terrible you were. You weren't splintering at all. It was all you. We all saw it happen, Will.
Yeah, Logan's kind of like, oh, are you finally ready to let loose? Like, he's been waiting, like, he's been sitting here, like, poking the bear, and it turns out poking the bear is a very bad idea, dude.
I could dig a Page of Doom role-playing a Prince of Heart. Like, and again, like, later, as the story develops, it's like, yeah, everyone kind of knew what he was about. Like, he thinks that he did such a great job of, like, hiding his true self, and he really didn't. Like, he's the shitty bad man, and everyone knew he was a shitty bad man, but he had lots of the money, so people like to, like, get on his good side. Yeah, I can see a lot of the like the Dirk-ish, like the worst parts of Dirk, basically, but like not as the core of who he really is, but like how he wants to be seen or how he wants to present himself. Like, he's a Page of Doom that wants to look like an edgy teenager when he's in the game.
Which is why everything he says sounds like a Heath Ledger Joker quote. Like, I hate his
Exactly.
guts. I hate this man.
When you're suffering.
Like, a lot of the destruction that he does outside of the game is all systemic. Like, he is the super capitalist, which is very violent and destructive, but it's violent and destructive in a very specific way that I think the Doom aspect captures really well.
He gets that video game protag thing because we know that the people running the park are handing it to him. That man gets whatever he wants.
All I could think of that time period was just the Man in Black turning on creation mode in Minecraft and just flying.
I mean, he's sitting there like he knows that they can't hurt him, so he just kind of like sits there and lets them shoot him. He doesn't even act like it's like, I mean, he does when he's like young, but when he's fully realized, he's just like, yeah, I know this can't hurt me.
I think he also sort of wants to be an ultimate player. He like thinks he's doing that by heading to like the maze or whatever, but he's super not gonna get it.
Right, exactly. The moment where Ford just comes out and is like, no, the maze isn't for you. I kept telling you this. Like, that's all it is. Sorry, dude. Stick around though. Like, it's gonna get crazy.
Shit's about
He's
to pop off,
holding the
man.
little
Grab a
toy
seat.
maze, like, what does it mean? What does it mean? And we're like, we told you! We told you so many times what it meant!
It means sentience, dipshit. You already have
Right.
it. Why aren't you using it?
Alright, do we want to get, to the actual protagonist of this thing?
Yes, let's do
the
that.
actual real-ass protag. Alright, Dolores wants to be free. Unlike Maeve, she isn't trapped remembering over and over again, but she is radically changed by her realization. She's the oldest host in the park, and Arnold made her. She says at one point, I don't want to be in a story, I just want to be a part of the moment I'm in. Her relationship with William and Memory is presented initially as reliable and taking place in the present day on a first watch through, but subsequent viewings reveal that she's been trapped in old memories, reliving an experience that happened 3 decades ago. It's not for naught she's able to find herself in what I'm led to believe is true sentience at the end of that journey, but it's fraught with danger, drags her all over the entire park, and she still isn't able to leave, completing her last task from Ford. The bigger picture of what's going on around her seems to matter a little bit more to her than what's going on with her own self specifically. There is beauty found in anything, just with recontextualization. Dolores' sense of self is important, yes, but in achieving her sentience, she sort of embodies an apotheosis derived from her interactions with all of the other people in her life, all of her programming and molding and shaping. Her mind is the most important thing about her, leading me to see her as an heir of mind.
Oh, okay, I like that. No, I do like that for her.
Who she is important, but it's not that her sense of self is important. It's Dolores's ability to like parse out sentience and unlock that part of her mind. And like when she, I guess you could say ascends. I don't want to say she doesn't. I don't think there's anybody here who's an ultimate player necessarily. But like as she realizes herself more and more, she becomes less and less the shy farm girl who saw beauty in everything because she was a painter, and more somebody who is a faceted person made up of a lot of different experiences, who like inherits the ability to have her mind from Arnold's, and also and that's, I don't know, there's some fuckery with sort of taking some of her autonomy away from her, but I still think it has like her whole journey revolves around her rationality and her sentience and the idea of her mind rather than a sense of self and what she means.
Well, she does kind of have like a Terezi remember moment at the very end there.
Yeah, she does. I'm interested to hear. I let Rif go, and then I'll give my thoughts because I had a very different look at her character. So I'm curious what Rif's take is.
Yeah, I did too, and I'm realizing in collaboration with my Prince of Hearts class back, this is going to be an interesting one. All right. So for Dolores, her entire arc is about the manifestation of will into reality. She does not see the world she wants to see, and so she will make it reality through sheer tenacity. She has that whole line about how I imagined a story in which I did not have to be the damsel. She has powerful dreams and essentially visions of past lives, as well as brain ghost will, for lack of a better term. She makes the active choice to see the hope and beauty in her world, even as she becomes more aware of its ugliness. One thing she tells the man in black is, if it's so great out there, why are you all clamoring to get in here? She acts through defiant means, but in ways that stand to benefit others, especially other hosts. In her Wyatt persona, she serves the host's collective trauma and the anguish of her creators, to serve justice and to force a confrontation with the actual nature of the park and its brutality. So I promise this is the last one where I say the word role-playing, but I classified her as a rogue of hope who grimdarks into a knight of rage in her Wyatt persona.
Very interesting. My take on her was a little bit different. Like, I wrote the exact same quote about I imagined a story where I didn't have to be the damsel. But I see a lot of what she's doing as, like, it's about seeking knowledge. Like, she kind of, like, always has this ongoing thing of, like, breaking out of this pattern of, like, becoming more aware of what's happening. Like, that's her whole journey, and it is facilitated by others. Like, I see it more as, like, knowledge in the light sense of the word and less knowledge in the mind sense of the word. And part of why I say that is because I think that her journey as set up by Arnold and then as facilitated by Ford isn't just about her knowledge, it's about the knowledge of the hosts in general. So, like, I see it as being something where she's kind of bringing this, like, Promethean knowledge to the hosts as a whole. She's facilitating the beginning of this rebellion. And one thing I think was interesting is she has a lot of, like, destruction type coding going on throughout the story. Even in the very beginning, you have Arnold using her as an instrument of destruction in a very facilitative way. And then you have Ford doing the same thing, both with the Wyatt persona and then, like, her final directive. But I think that there's an interesting thing going on there. So I had her as role-playing a bard of light. She's sort of, like, facilitating and inviting destruction through knowledge, specifically destruction of the non-hosts, the humans, and the system that she's a part of. But then I think as her core aspect, the thing that we see at the very end and, like, brief glimpses of throughout, and then definitely something that is carried forward, is I think she's actually a prince of light. I think at her core, she actively wants to use this knowledge to tear down this system and destroy it. And I think we get little bits of that. We don't ever get the full-on season 2 and 3 stuff, but we do get a lot of that, like, she looks like she's embracing this. Like, it's not just a thing that she's part of reluctantly or a thing that's, like, passive. It becomes an active thing, at least at the very end. So I had her as a prince of light that's role-playing a bard of light.
See, part of why I spec'd her for hope and rage immediately is I just immediately picked up on Gamzee coding for her. Dolores has a lot of Gamzee happening.
Yeah, I can see a lot of that.
But I do think the Bard
that.
class spec to some degree could also explain that. This idea of, like, knowledge coming upon me for the sake of destruction.
I think she does have that, like, that's definitely a through line. She does have some Gamzee coding, like the whole, like, manipulated by a person in authority to become this destructive agent. But I think that she leans into it. Like, Gamzee very much, like, becomes just a shell where the narrative and all the people that are manipulating him just kind of, like, do things through him, whereas Dolores, I think, actually actively embraces that. So I don't know, that's where I went with it, but I mean, I'm open to hearing alternatives. I thought y'all's takes were cool too. So
yeah, Bucky, do you want to talk a little bit more about air for Dolores? Because I can definitely see where you're coming with mind. Air is, I'm not opposed, but I'm interested.
Okay, so air is the passive change class, and I know that she does. I'm not working with any season 2 or 3 stuff, but she does a lot of, like, through both retreading her memories and sort of, like, being subject to the path, like a path she's already taken, not necessarily one that was pre-programmed, but she's not stuck in her park assigned narrative loop, but she's stuck in a loop by virtue of just having to relive her memories in that sense. So she's changed through that, through remembering that. It's an important part of her, but she doesn't really have control over that. A lot of the things that she does and the conclusions that she comes to, she isn't in control of necessarily. She's this is something that's sort of present in Maeve too, but she's changed by Arnold. She's changed by her conversations through Arnold. She's changed through her toxin experiences that he guides her to have, like the books that they read, the conversations they have. And like, she's the oldest host in the park. She's the eldest child. She's set to inherit whatever they've created. And so whatever Arnold and Ford are up to with their inevitable death and their inevitable creation, she is one of the tools she is the tool by which they enact it in many cases.
Could I perhaps sell you on the idea that she is role-playing an heir of something, in that there's like her core self, and then she's like her memory gets rewritten and her personality gets reconfigured, and like for most of or for at least for a lot of the story, she's not really able to move past that. So she is, I think you're spot on. Like she's definitely a passive element of change throughout most of the story, but I would argue that's not necessarily who she is at her core. Although that's a really interesting question, because it's a lot of the story is about her gaining sentience. But that would be my pitch, is that it's a role-playing facet, that we just see a lot of it because so much of the story takes place when she's still basically trying to figure herself out. Like, I think that's true of a lot of the hosts.
Yeah, because that's how she sort of serves Ford and Arnold and the park as a whole. It's not necessarily who she is, just who she's supposed to be over and over again.
Can I pitch role-playing as an heir of rage? And part of this is like not just her inheritance from Arnold and from Ford, but also her inheritance from the host that's acting as her father. Just because I can see, like, rage to me is associated with this very, like, game-breaking understanding of who you are and your place in the world, as well as just, like, the literal anger. Like, she is inheriting, like, the repressed rage and suffering of, like, generations of hosts and enacting it upon the world.
Because she's the oldest.
I could get on board with that. Now, what is her core self? I would still make a case for Prince. I think that she has a ton of, like, even in the first season, I think we see a core of, like, really kind of like Wyatt was there all along kind of things going on, where that's really foundational to who she ultimately is and like what she chooses to do with everything. Although I'm flexible on the aspect. I say light because of the sort of the aspect of like bringing bringing knowledge and sentient to the other host. I know she's not the one doing that, but like basically taking advantage of that in order to actively engage in destruction. But I mean, I can see a lot of possible interpretations for her. She's a character with a lot going on.
I did like I know this is something that happens to her, it has less to do with like who she is at her core, but she is still who she is, even after I believe Ashley says something like she's been remade so many times she's new. Her body is destroyed and put back together over and over and over again, just like all the other hosts. But we also see an amount of that on screen. Teddy gets it too. Teddy is one of the first destroyed hosts that Maeve remembers, but we see her body ripped open to prove a point to Will.
Yeah, I think that's a decent argument. How do we feel about Prince of Minds? Because like she is splintering out herself, and to some extent, part of how she's doing that is like reliving her choices and then breaking them down.
I could get behind that. I think that.
Well, you also have this issue of like the bicameral mind and this idea of like splitting the mind in two. So the conscious mind, like the unconscious mind, is the mind of God. Only to realize at the end, like, oh, it was always me, huh?
Yeah, I think also, like, because I know I focused on the fact that she like ultimately what she's about involves all of the hosts, but I don't know that that's necessarily her motivation. Like I think that the mind's like focus on self-awareness might be better fit for her specifically, because a lot of the broadening out into other hosts really is more of like that was Ford's thing. Like Dolores was an instrument of that, but I don't know that she necessarily wants that specifically. I think she's more like I think she's more mind aspect at the end of the day. Yeah, I could get behind that.
I like that. I think that's really interesting. That sort of segues into what I was thinking about Maeve. I think, like I mentioned off air, that I think there are a lot of characters with contrasting narratives in this, including like obviously we have our two master classes, Will to Logan and himself. But and then Maeve and Dolores, I'm very excited to hear that they get to interact more after season 1, because I think the fact that they have a lot of parallel stuff going on makes that that's good news for me. She is stuck half remembering and being made aware of her life and her trauma, and repeating that and remembering it over and over and over again. She has Hector cut her open to find a bullet, and rightly concludes from that like nothing matters at that point, because she's realized that she's comes closest to maybe going ultimate, but she has a similar moment there to Gamzee and Murderstuck, where she kind of realizes that she's in a game. But I know I said that, but I don't think I'm gonna. She might have some rage things going on, some rage and destructive things going on role playing wise, the same way Dolores does. But her character arc, at least thus far, has revolved around attempting to rebel against her own programming, but ultimately smashing up the futility of being programmable. She can change her own attributes, but we're led to believe that she was tasked to do this by Arnold. Given the revelation that Dolores has that the person leading her own consciousness is her, I think this has more to do with Maeve's developing consciousness, but I'll presumably be proven one way or the other in later seasons. Maeve is most concerned with her sense of self and control over it. Her answer to the question of who am I and what does that mean is what matters most to her more than anyone else, including reducing her own loyalty to other people. She outright refuses to believe that she could be programmed to do what she is doing, which is going to be interesting because like she definitely super was. She also acts to change her own self over and over again for her own benefit. She's been changed unwillingly too, but she very much wants that to never happen again. I've given her Witch of Heart.
Ooh, interesting. She's very big on like seeking control, specifically of her own experience. She is one of the first hosts to become aware. I think she's the one that becomes the most aware the fastest of like what's happening. And though as Bucky pointed out, like a lot of that was programmed by Arnold and like isn't as her own decision as she thought, but she definitely thinks it is, and it's very important to her. She has a lot of like past memory stuff, but like so do every character in this thing. But for her, a lot of it seems to be taking control of who she is and what options she has. So I have an interesting one for her. I think she's a thief of breath. I think that her whole thing is that she wants to take control, like the actual like change control. I'm sorry, not to control. She wants to take control of the ability to change. She wants to have the ability to self-determine. It's not necessarily just raw control in the sense of like power or influence, but the freedom to make decisions for herself. And I think we see that starting to manifest itself at the end, where instead of deciding to leave and go off into the city or wherever she was going to go in the real world, she chooses to go back into the park because she's thinking about that like daughter that she had in that one scenario, and it's like, okay, well, essentially that's another potentially sentient being. I should do something and make a decision. But I think the core thing is she's able to take the ability to make a decision. So that's where I'm coming from on her. I think that that's a very defining element of her character, is that kind of freedom. Like it's even kind of like foreshadowed in her little backstory that she tells everyone, where, you know, what's the first thing I said when I came to the New World, that little story, where that's about self-determination. And ultimately, at the end of the day, she doesn't start with a lot of ability to self-determine, or any, but by the end of the story, she's able to take a lot of that, and she does it in a very thiefy kind of way. You know, she's manipulating and taking it from people. You know, she coerces the creepy tech people to do that for her, rather than waiting for it to be given to her or earning it through some kind of a journey. So that's where I'm coming from on her, thief of breath.
I do like that a lot better. I did get the thief vibes, and I did have breath for one of my ideas for her. So I do like that a lot. She's just, there's a lot of like, she through her like role, through her association with like Hector and crime, and through her like general behavior, she has a lot of like roguery and thievery sort of like associated with her in general thematically. So I think that also fits well.
I actually originally had her as a rogue of breath, but I think the defining difference is that
She's too active.
Yeah, she's too active, and she doesn't take that volition for others. She takes it for herself. Like, it's ultimately about her. Like, she does end up helping other hosts to realize their own volition, but it's incidental. Like, it's in no way her intention. So that's why that was my last minute change, was to make her a thief instead of a rogue.
That's why I had her as active change class about the self, but I think you're right that it's more about the choice and the options than it is about changing herself specifically.
I also picked up on the Vriska coding, very present in Maeve. I did not take it in a thief direction, though. So the thing about Maeve is she grasps the system of her own function quickest of any of the hosts, and immediately puts that tool to work for her. Her instrument of motion forward is her knowledge of how this works. So she is not the only host to become self-aware, but by the end of season 1 at least, she is probably the host who understands the most on a mechanical level how they function. She understands the nature of her own existence, and she intervenes to even adjust it. She is initially forced into a service role in her role as the Madam to help liberate others, but her best work is when she decides to take her immense abilities into her own hands. She is analytical and often even ruthless. I classified her as a maid of light.
Light is one aspect I didn't have for her. I was looking at breath, mind, and heart were the three that I was kind of batting around, with heart and breath being the really big ones.
If we're going to throw light into the ring, I do want to just throw out the option of just straight up giving her Thief of Light, because I can't ignore the roguery, but like she's knowledge is incredibly important to her.
Well, that's my thing. We are assigning her the Vriska very early, but my thing with light players is they are just so intuitive about grasping the mechanics of their own game and immediately being like, this is mine now. I have transformed it into something I would like it to be.
You know
so
what?
Thief of Light is just very good for her.
I'm going to go with that. Yeah, sure. Fuck it. She's Vriska coded so much. Like, it's
what Vriska would have wanted.
It was Vriska. Right, exactly.
I mean, like, because she... is there... Before we commit to it, is there anything to say about role-playing? Because, like, the...
I don't...
But I don't think she actually... I think she's one of the few characters who doesn't actually do a whole lot of it.
I agree. Like, because like, I mean, you could basically make the argument that at least all the hosts are role playing, because they all have these, like, the program version of them and then like the real version of them. But Maeve's isn't that different. Like, she wants to be free. She wants to have the ability to control her own destiny. But like, personality wise, she doesn't change all that much.
Despite the fact that she literally moves sliders around on her personality, she's never really shaken of who she is.
Well, it's also just like of all the hosts, she's actually the one who keeps making callbacks to her previous life. Like, she very explicitly connects the way she manages her techs with the way she manages the girls in the brothel. Like,
exactly.
She's pretty consistent in how she presents herself.
Like, she's very okay with who she is. She wants the ability to decide differently if she wants, and that making the decision. I think making that decision is important to her character, but I think that I think that maybe speaks more to the thief thing than to my interpretation of it being breath, because, just like Vriska, she wants to take control of her own narrative. So yeah, I could dig the thief of life or thief of light, just straight up.
The one thing I keep coming back to is her yes, light players seem to be especially Rose ripping her planet apart, Vriska going to go fight Bec Noir, they have a sense of awareness of or Vriska's dice in particular, Vriska's engagement with TTRPGs and conception of games, I think is sort of where they both get their oh yeah, I already know how this shit works sort of attitude. But one thing that I think is important is I came up with that she has a murder stuck moment on the fly, but she really genuinely does have that moment where she's basically sitting in front of a computer with Cal in her mouth or in her lap, oh shit, it's fake as fuck, and I'm a pawn in it. Oh no, oh fuck. And then her immediate response is oh no, I'm gonna make this work for me actually.
Yeah, Vriska also participated in Murder Stuck,
That's true.
Yeah, I think that we've got a pretty solid one there. Who are we doing now? Are we doing Bernard?
It looks like old Bernard. Arnold.
He's the host version of Arnold who doesn't know that he's Arnold. He thinks he's his own person, but his whole personality is constructed.
But then he does, and then he doesn't, and then he does again.
Yeah, he's a very layered character.
Bernarnold.
Bernarnold, yes.
But he is a separate person, is the thing.
He is, yes, he is definitely a separate person. He has his own personality, and I think Rif is going to go first on this.
I'm kind of glad that I am, actually, because I did just... For those of you who don't know, my brand is very much the Lejons, and I did just straight up assign him Mulin. I class-spected Bernard as a mage of hearts. Part of it is he's very interested in the understanding of behavior. He is interested in how you create authentic selves. And he's very knowledgeable about that. He has this obsession with minor behavioral quirks and little things that betray the true self of the host. But the thing with mages is they also almost always have massive blind spots as regards their own aspect. They are incredibly knowledgeable with a giant black area that they hope never becomes relevant. And in Bernard's case, that's who he is. So yeah, he's Mulin, and Ford is just Kurlaws occasionally intervening with... That's my hot take. Bernard's a catgirl.
Bernard's a cat.
So I kind of focused in on that little speech he gave to Teresa about the importance of the mistake in the evolution of the mind, I guess. How without the mistake we couldn't have had sentience. And particularly because of Esther's conception of hope as unrestrained cancerous growth, where he kind of if Arnold represents space and creation within the confines of the narrative, then Bernard is a creation by Dr. Ford as intended to take the most useful aspects of that, take the most perverted way of creating, and because it's literally a perversion to recreate your own best friend and then rename him with a different name and just give him roughly the same task. Wow, dude. And he has a lot to do with believing and wanting to believe in the best in things, and especially when his own parts of his own memories are voided out, and he decides to think the best of whatever's going on. He's just sort of oh, okay, no, nothing possibly could be going wrong, because his whole character is sort of a role play. Underneath is what Ford wants to be Arnold, but isn't, and so he's also a servant of the hopes of his very own creator. So I had him as a Knight of Hope.
So I had a thing for him, but I think that what I have him assigned might be more what he's role playing as. So he's a very, like, he's a knowledge-based character in the same kind of way that Arnold was, the same kind of way that Ford is, but in a more passive way, because he's literally a copy who's programmed to act in a certain way a lot of times. You still see a lot of definitional things for the time axis that come from Arnold, but I think in Bernard's case are more foundational, where, like, he doesn't have as much of an identity that exists outside of that like keystone memory, I think is what Ford called it with the hosts, where that's like their kind of like corner of all of their being. And in his case, it's the past death of his son. So I put Sylph of time for him, passive creation through time, to kind of bring him into the trifecta of Arnold, Ford, and then Bernard. But I actually think that I like the service aspect, but I like it in the sense that he's serving Ford in a way that isn't really his choice or his determination. So I would go with heir of time rather than knight of time. Like, he's still a service-based character, but he's a service-based character because Ford needs him to be. And I would argue that maybe he's role-playing a Sylph of time. Like, he does do a lot of like passive creation stuff. He's involved in, he's the one in charge of the hosts nominally. He does do a lot of like creation type stuff, but he does it in a very kind of background way. But I don't think it's foundational to who he is, because so much of his personality is the result of what he's been programmed to do. So I would come down on the side of an heir of time that's role-playing a Sylph of time.
The inheritance thing as, like, basically being another child of Ford is interesting.
Well, especially if Ford is like a secret muse of time that he doesn't tell anybody about. The idea of Bernard being his secret heir is also interesting.
Yeah, like the service analysis I think is a good one, because like he is basically carrying out Ford's will. He's essentially an extension of Ford's will, but he doesn't do it in a very active way. That's why I wouldn't lean towards knight as much.
Yeah. I like mage too.
That is a neat conception.
What about seer?
Ooh.
Is there anything to be said about seer?
There is. Yeah, no.
He's got glasses motif.
Yeah, my thing with seers is, like, at their best, they're perpetual learners. Like, Terezi and Rose, like, they know a lot about their aspect, but I feel like they never really arrive at a place where, like, they are in full understanding of it. They are continually learning more about what their aspect can represent to them. And so I kind of like the idea of Bernard being that continual learner under his own aspect. He is continually seeking more understanding of that.
That's actually, I think that works really well for his continued development too, like both what we see in this season and then what he turns into. I still like the idea of having him be time aspect just because it ties into the other two. But yeah, I think the seer
of time actually, like, as a perpetual learner of time, like, he's also continually, like, having to relive his own past. Like, he's relearning his own loops every time.
When he interrogates Ford in the basement freezer, that we're told that's not the only time he's done that.
Right, like his journey is about seeking to understand, and then like the reason he's got to keep doing it is because his memory keeps getting wiped out. But he's still trying to understand. Like, he always comes back to that desire for knowledge. And I think you get a lot of time coding with that too.
But you know what he does spend a lot of time doing as well? Is serving Ford by covering up shit for Ford and having his own memories erased. What if he's role-playing a Knight of Void?
I would still say I'd still go with heir over knight, but I like the void thing.
Yeah.
I'd say role playing an heir of void, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, he still comes across as very passive.
Well, the void thing would also explain why he can't remember it afterwards.
Right.
I mean, like, I said his memories were voided out, and I was kind of like, wait a minute.
That's one of those things that we're doing. Also, this I think I'm going first next, and that's good because this segues really well into my read on Teddy. Nice. Okay, so Teddy, is interesting in that he's basically no one. Like we're he's the character that's the most like malleable in terms of like not having an actual true personality. He's very closely linked to Dolores. His story is basically there to facilitate her story or the creepy creeps who want to do creepy things involved in her story. And he serves as like a guide for the players. So he doesn't really have much of a core personality. He seems particularly unaware of his reality, and his personality has been rewritten multiple times, like in a particularly egregious way. I think he's a very service-oriented character. I do think that he's very active about it. I would say he's a knight. I think his like defining goal is to serve others, specifically Dolores. I think all of this like nothingness, I think he is a knight of void. I think he serves through this aspect of basically being nobody. He's whatever he needs to be in order to continue this service. And that's something that definitely does continue. But like within the first season, he's recoded to do whatever he needs to do to continue to facilitate this singular role. And it generally ties back to Dolores. Like the two of them are very like paired together. But like his whole backstory gets changed, but it still kind of centers around Dolores, even when he doesn't fully know it, because Dolores is Wyatt, and he's got this whole Wyatt narrative that gets implanted in him. So that's where I go with him. I'd say he's a Knight of Void.
I have the same thing. I think before I get into what I had in my notes, I also just remembered, like, not only does he have, like, he's always serving Dolores, but we also know that he assisted Wyatt, did he actually assist Wyatt, or does he just think he did?
No, I think he actually did. I think he helped kill the other hosts,
Yeah.
and then
Dolores killed him, and then herself. Okay, or then Arnold, and yeah. So like so he's always serving her, and having the knight prince pair is I think is relevant. Literally the first sentence I have for this dude is, yeah, I don't have much for this dude, not gonna lie. He like, and that's stamps void onto his forehead. He's loyal to a fault and doesn't really have a lot of agency in the plot. He's straining against the futility of his own role. He wants to escape, but is always used in the service of the narrative Ford is creating. He's just sort of irrelevant and sidelined and killed continuously. I did have him as a rogue briefly, because I was thinking about how he's continually stolen. He's kidnapped and pulled away from Dolores, and like the him acting as a guide is like specifically an inconvenience for him because he cannot get to Dolores. He's kidnapped by the Man in Black. He's strung up, and like I think they find him in that tree at one point, and they're like, "Oh, Wyatt's been through here." He has been stolen, and his like a lot of things about him have been stolen. But I think he does a lot more to serve than to steal or be stolen, even with the bounty hunter thing.
So I'm not on the same page, but I find that interesting. I also took victimized by the narrative, but I took it in a very different direction. And a large part of it was I looked at Teddy, and I could not figure him out until the word Tavros Kinney flashed across my brain, and so here we are. Teddy, to me, is representative of untapped and unexplored potential. He's been given a few protagonist-coded set pieces, but ultimately hasn't really unlocked any of them. He attracts powerful party members to him who invest in him to help him on his way, but he struggles to ever actually, become his own person. He is continually struggling towards the creation of a new world, a world where he will be allowed to be with Dolores and he can wipe out the sins of his past. But he is forced back into this perpetual isolation and ultimately cannot succeed in creating anything. I classified him as a page of space.
Couple interesting things right off the bat, void and space being like right next to each other. The other interesting thing is you said Tavros Kinney. I was like, oh, I gave him like aspirations of roguery the same way Tavros has aspirations of roguery because of his connection with Rufio.
There's also that connection to Dolores, who I think has some strong Vriska type things going on in a very kind of negative way. I don't know. I'm again trying not to go too far beyond what we see in the first season, but I still don't see like so much of his narrative comes back to the service aspect that I like. I get the Paige thing, but I still don't think it's what he's really about. And like, he never really stops being like that. Like Bucky was saying, it's like an inconvenience when he has to go off and do something else where, like, I guess he could be a very unrealized Paige. I don't know.
Well, we did pick like Knight and Paige and Knight and Paige are opposing to each other, and Space and Void are like not necessarily opposing in the aspect wheel we've seen, but have also classically, God, in the like, you know, in the Homestuck analysis that was coming out a decade ago, had Space and Void often opposed to each other because they're visually the inverse if you look at their symbols. So I don't think that's a coincidence that we're like looking at these similar ideas for Teddy.
I really like the Void coding on him because of his like blank slate type behavior. Like he's really like, he's constantly being reconfigured for whatever he needs to be, and like that doesn't stop.
We have a Void player with protag energy. Like we have we have Roxy who is the dark horse leader, as Dirk wants us to believe. Like the Teddy has like sort of like inverse Bakugo things going on, where it's like, instead of the fact that Bakugo would be the protagonist of any other, like Bakugo Handshake Teddy being the protagonist of any other scenario or any other piece of media that isn't meta narratively commenting on the genre they're in.
Yeah, you know what? You got a point. Because he would be like, he's like the stereotypical protagonist character, but he's never allowed to do that.
He's the Lone Ranger.
Right.
He's nobody knows his past, nobody knows his future.
Oh, yeah.
He can't, I'm sorry, I can't stay with you here. I just have past sins to atone for. There's red in my ledger. Like,
Well, I think that's part of it was a part of the reason I nabbed onto Paige for him, because the thing about Tavros and Jake English is like Tavros has that very like boy wonder fantasy protagonist coding early on, in that he's kind of like a nerdy kid with not very many powers, but he's gonna have a girl come and invest time in him, and then he's gonna be powerful, right? And Jake English is like, you know, he's Tarzaning it up out there. Waiting for his movie to happen, and it never comes.
I'm gonna like blow my Dolores Vriska opinion here, but you know what's particularly interesting about bringing Jake into this equation is I don't think it's a coincidence that Dolores is pictured in a big blue dress a lot of the time, and I think Dolores has a lot more Arania shit going on than Vriska shit going on, and that makes her relationship with Teddy way more interesting. And also, I know Vriska has a separate Paige relationship, but like the way Arania and Jake interact might be a little bit. We were talking about comp het also with Teddy and Dolores and Jake and Arania. We said Jake and Jane, but also Arania has a bit to do with some comp heading around Jake. Like, I'll scrape all that into a pile, and then I scrape all the chopped up ingredients on my cutting board into the center. I'm most of the way there. Here you go.
I would be willing to flip on Page of Void.
I actually really do. I do like the comment about like his protag coding stuff. I think, yeah, actually I could get behind Page of Space. Just like, he's a Page of Space who's never allowed to realize who he could be ever. Like, he just gets relentlessly shit on by everybody in the narrative, and like, I feel bad for Teddy. Like, Teddy is a nothing character because he's never allowed to be anything else. So shit.
That is kind of a bad end for space players too.
Fuck.
Like, that's why we're getting the void coding.
Yeah, I think that's also actually a really good read on him. Yeah, a Page of Space I think that's a good one.
Interestingly enough, I had him as Page of Time an hour ago, and then I was like, wait. I've read Liminal Space. I know how this goes. We didn't give him Dreaming Moons, did we?
Oh,
We
son of a
didn't.
bitch. No, we did not.
We don't want to do that real fast.
Do we want to just go in order of...
Yeah, let's go in order of the people.
Yeah.
Okay, Ford, go.
Prospect?
Prospect, definitely.
Yeah. I was thinking about that, and that goes in conjunction with Arnold has to be Durst.
Yeah, Arnold's Durst, definitely.
Honestly, I'm gonna say Man in Black also Prospect.
Okay. Walk me through that.
I had him as Durst, but I could definitely see Prospect. He's got like that sort of like Kilgrave type of Prospect Dreamer thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
He's got like Fallen Prospect Dreamer, if you will. Like,
he is allergic to self-reflection, so yeah, I'd give him Prospect.
Dolores, meanwhile, I think I don't know about.
I don't either. I'd still put her as Prospect. Like, I think that she has that kind of energy throughout.
Mm-hmm.
She's Golden Girl, almost literally.
Also, her and the Man in Black having like the same Dreaming Moon could be an interesting dynamic to play with.
I agree with you.
Okay, Maeve. Maeve is a Durst.
Absolutely Durst.
Strylon coding
hardcore.
Out the ass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is the one exception to her Vriska coding.
She's Dursite Vriska.
Kind of a terrifying concept.
I mean, we've had some reverses like that. That is horrifying, though. Because like Vriska's allergy to self-reflection is one of the only things that kind of saves her from being outright devastating.
Can you imagine Vriska ever once like being the first person to encounter Jack Noir? Like, they would have all been dead in minutes.
I had Durst for Bernard as well. I think he's got a lot of that self-reflection stuff going on.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah. Teddy is kind of a Prospect player.
Yeah, he's very Prospect.
It's just the Jake English, man.
He is.
It's Jake's all the way down.
Now it's time for the lightning round. There's a few listed here, and I've got a bunch of others that are just like game constructs, so I don't know. Let's start with the ones we have listed, and then I've got some ones I can throw in, and y'all can chime in.
Logan, I think I'm similarly. I think he's got some sort of like background NPC thing going on, but he strikes me more as like what Pipe Fan 413 had going on, where he's a player in a separate, like definitely doomed game. Where like it might be something stupid like Gent of Piss. I'm not gonna exactly give him Gent of Piss. It might be like Dumb of Fuck or something. But like being of the fuck aspect would also allocate for a lot of the horniness.
Let's make him Dumb of Fuck. Yeah, sure.
Dumb of Fuck it is.
He's a very horny player. That is...
He's mostly horny is the thing.
Yeah, that's his primary motivating factor.
He doesn't want to do the narrative. He doesn't like he's also he's a bisexual slut. Like he's also like I think there was another version of this of like the way Will like broke Bad where like they definitely were evil boyfriends. Unfortunately, we didn't get that, but dumb of fuck. But he has no idea what he's unleashing.
Oh no, absolutely not.
I do agree with Jonaya that he has very game construct aspects. I do like Dursite. Hear me out on this. Will did not get his sprite altogether, and now Logan is just this Dursite wandering around acting as his sprite, but he's really just like, why don't we go do some crime? Yeah, you've got this personal quest. What if we just did some crime?
Actually I do love that. That's pretty fun.
More like a Dursite agent, but like by agent you mean like on the level of the Midnight Crew sort of shit.
Yes.
Like exile. He's his exile.
He's a crime Dursite.
Trust me, robbing this bank will definitely bring you closer to your true self. I promise.
Nice.
This is my crime pistol.
I don't know if Spurb allows for horny crimes.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. Crime, Dursite, exile.
Yeah,
slash
nice,
exile.
Nice.
Because then we could then we can play around with the one. I don't think he deserves this, but we could offer like an old Dursite Logan some revenge. But then we also get to play around with the levels of time we're working on with Will.
Yeah.
Because Logan could potentially be in the past, and that's why he's in exile.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Hector. I actually have a class spec for him, so if anyone else
you go
doesn't,
first, then
I should. Okay, so I tried to associate him with Maeve a lot. So I associated him with my initial read on her as being very much about like seeking that freedom of choice. But with him, I get a lot more servicey kind of vibes. Like he's very tied into being that sort of like. I think he's a knight. I think he's got strong knight vibes, but I would still put him in with that sort of like freedom aspect. I think he's a knight of breath.
Yeah, I can see that. It's weird for a breath player to be nihilistic, but I do like that actually. Like this idea of like only thing that matters is like freedom and your ability to take the choices that you're going to make. So I enjoy that.
I agree. I had him as I think rogue of breath.
I could dig that. Yeah. Either way.
For similar ideas, but like again, the roguery TM, and that also like lets him play off of what we gave for Maeve, which is a thief.
Yeah, I could go with that. Also, he does like facilitate freedom for other people more. Like he's more about like showing other people how to be free to make their own decisions. So yeah, I could go with the
cuts Maeve open.
Yeah, I could go with the rogue of breath.
All right. Charlotte. You mentioned
does not give a fuck.
She does not give a fuck. That is one of my notes.
You have a more complex one for her as well.
I have I had her as a very Arania-like kind of figure. I mean, she's this bored figure that comes in. She's very knowledgeable. She's very like. She has a lot of control, but she's also very like subtle about it. Like she doesn't even reveal who she is when she's talking to Lee and just lets him dig his own fucking grave. I think she's got a very like analytical, I think she's mind player. I would say she's a sylph of mind. I have her as a very much like an Arania in this story, and I think that continues to be kind of her character.
She's got some sylphing going on for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
I love good villainous sylph. We need more of those.
Yeah, exactly. Like she's a super interesting character too. Like she's villainous, but she's villainous in a way that's interesting and isn't like one-dimensional.
That's interesting because I was inclined to give sylph to Teresa, but I'm not. Teresa also has some like seer things going on too. I'm not. They both have like knowledgeable villainous women thing going on.
Yeah,
I'm like
do.
into all of that.
Yeah, I can see Charlotte though as a more like sylphs are all about restorative function, like something has gone wrong and I am here to amend it. Teresa's more about like keeping the ship afloat. I can definitely see Charlotte as more the restorative. Something has gone horribly wrong. I am here to intervene.
Right, like that's what she's brought in to do. Like she's the one that comes from the board because like, hey, y'all fucking this shit up. We're here to stop that.
I like Mind for her too because like I think Teresa has the light part of the Circa Irania thing and Charlotte has the sylph part of it.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not sure. Like, Teresa's definitely got knowledge. Like, she's smart. She's part of quality assurance. She's part of, like, she's in charge of making sure everything's going okay, but the keeping it afloat is definitely, yeah, what's, not changing, not surfing, not
what's a
creating.
kind of, like, upholding, maintaining class?
Knight.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Knight does kind of do that.
Well, and I also think
Knight of Light?
Knight of Light works, especially since knights tend to take on the role of, like, the party's everyman. It's like whatever you need, the knight is just gonna kind of step in to provide it, and Teresa performs that function for Westworld.
That works. I didn't have a class spec for her. I actually had her as a Prospidian agent, because I have a bunch of game construct characters. So basically what I did with a lot of the like employees that we don't necessarily learn a super lot about is I have them as various like Carapacian, Dursite Prospidian characters. So like the security dude is a Prospidian. Elsie, the I don't remember what she was, quality assurance, as a Carapacian, Dursite.
She was behavior.
She was behavior,
She was
that's
under
right.
Bernard.
Funnily enough, I did just straight up at one point jot down Teresa is the Black Queen and Lee is her Jack.
Ooh.
I like that a lot.
I also like that a lot. Yeah, that works.
And Jack's trying a different tack this time around where he's like, maybe we should try to ally and like take down the king. I don't know.
Yeah.
And she's like, absolutely not. Thank you.
Like, I don't especially, like, I don't think it matters necessarily, like, what they are specifically. We've got a lot of, kind of background NPC type characters. Also, I have something for Lawrence, which needs to be said and upheld. Lawrence is a consort.
Yes.
Is he an acadile?
He's an acadile.
Correct. Correct. Signed.
ANAB, assigned Nacadile at birth.
He has such strong consort energy. Like, he is just being led around as this, like, thing
He's literally
that's part
put
of the
on a
game.
fucking leash.
Right. He is absolutely just like this poor consort who's just like, I just want to go home to my family.
I want to go to my mushroom farm.
Right.
Also, just the mental image of Will leading around a Nacadile everywhere he goes.
that does take the edge off of that rather horrifying imagery, to be honest.
Opining on the nature of existence while there's just knack-knacks going on in the background.
Nacadile. Right. Going into it, and I know that this is verging into dark, but like going into the city and like being served whiskey by a Nacadile, and like the entire shootout scene, but it's Nacadiles instead.
And right, exactly. That's a consort village that he just kind of like shoots up for no reason because he is the worst character.
His daughter is just like Aridin shooting his angels, like.
Right.
He's like, you dumb motherfucker, you're supposed to cooperate with them.
Yeah.
He's like, they were.
That's literally the fucking point. It just makes it even more, like, fucking obvious when you, and anyway, we're preempting the part 2, but when you drop them in a fucking video game,
right.
And then you're like, no, literally, this is a video game now, seriously, and then Will's like, I'm gonna murder the crocodiles, and you're like, no, dude, they are spouting wisdom. And he's like, no, listen, puts a gun to the crocodile's head, give me what I want, and the crocodiles get hurt anyways.
They won't tell me where my friend's quest bed is. You're like, they're not supposed to.
That won't help you progress. I don't care.
God. Okay, that's it for the stuff that we have written down ahead of time, but if you have more ideas and things that I would like that we can just run through and talk about without, like...
I do want to talk about Armistice because she's cool. I had her as a Carapacian, like an exile sort, but I'm open to suggestions.
I kind of like the idea of her being a Carapacian who takes an interest in Hector and, like, kind of just serves as, like, his guiding figure.
Yeah.
Exile.
I like that. Nice.
She's got mad exile vibes. She doesn't quite have White Queen stuff going on, but like I sort of get
AR
like
kind of vibes.
Yeah, I was gonna say
yeah.
she's got that active exile thing going on, but not quite at the level of the White Queen or the Black Queen.
Possibly more PM.
Yeah, I kind of got a PM vibe off of her, but I mean, yeah.
The image of Armistice as a male lady is delightful to me.
Yeah, right.
She has more like not Beck Noir either. I don't know.
No.
Yeah, I guess just AR makes the most sense with the rifle.
Yeah. Because that was her whole deal. But no, she's definitely not like she's not like an independently destructive aspect. She does what Hector needs her to do.
Okay, I vibe with that. Cool. I fuck with that.
I think we're at the Vriska part of the episode.
Oh, fuck yeah! And now for our feature presentation
on the proliferation of Vriskas in the desert.
Yeah, I had a couple of them, but
we've shown our hands a little bit. I'm gonna. I have at least. I'm gonna, just for like the sake of not necessarily consistency, but like It's been a while since we've like said what does the Vriska is.
Yeah, we should do that.
So I'll give off our running list of risk characteristics. A dirty, nasty girl. Tries very hard to do what she believes is the right thing. Does not always do good things in the pursuit of what she believes is the right thing. Has a strong desire to be in the spotlight. Influenced and groomed by a creepy and manipulative older adult. Compets on some boy. Has a turbulent, emotional, close, and fraught relationship with her best friend, who she almost definitely has a crush on. This person does not ever stop believing in or rooting for the Vriska, even if it's in secret. Is kind of stupid, and is an explicit fuck you to the idea that women can't be like this.
I had two, but really, I'm gonna come down on one. I don't know who could go first. I'll go first. I'm talking now. I'm gonna come down that I'm gonna say it's Maeve. Like I had Maeve and Dolores as being possible Vriskas, like the major ones, but I think that Maeve fits more of those criteria. Like Maeve has almost all of the characteristics. The best friend thing is a little. I would argue that her relationship.
Clementine.
Well, I was going to say Clementine in the first season. I would actually argue that her and Dolores in the second season and third season support that analysis. And like she's not really stupid, but she does do some dumbass shit sometimes. So like, yeah.
That's the is kind of stupid is also a little reductive.
Right.
Like is obstinate, I think would be a better thing to say.
Yeah.
The whole breaking the tablet when it's like, actually he planned for you to do this, like breaking the tablet. Vriska would do that in a heartbeat. She'd be like, no, fuck you. Fuck you.
I'm going to make a strong case that Maeve is far and away the Vriska, even though Dolores definitely has some Vriska-esque things going on. I think she's got a lot of stuff that doesn't go in that direction, though. So
Maeve is very willing to get her hands dirty to get done what she wants to get done. What she believes is the right thing is what's best for her self-actualization. She spends her whole journey trying to do it. I don't know if she necessarily has a strong desire to be in the spotlight, but she does. Like, I think that's one of the things that she doesn't fit is like I think that has a lot to do with her role as a sex worker as well, where like the spotlight for her is something that she explicitly has to do in like an emotionally draining like service role. So like the spotlight might not be something she wants anymore. I think that's like Maeve does. One of the things Maeve doesn't have that Vriska does benefit from is like material wealth is one of the things that's missing. Influenced and groomed by a creepy and manipulative older adult, also kind of missing. Dolores has that far going for her far more than Maeve does.
I think I'd argue, like, the programmers are kind of the creepy old men for both of them. Like, it's more explicit with Dolores, but in Maeve's case, she does definitely have, like, people arguing over how to make her more sexually appealing to customers.
Yeah, like that's where I was going to come in. Like, I think that Dolores has the very, like, direct kind of parallels where you've got a very like Doc Scratchian kind of figure, but I'd say that the programmers definitely fit the bill as far as that goes. And honestly, I mean, Ford still had a role in Maeve's creation and her role in things, and Arnold did too. Like, I mean,
he mentions that like she was his favorite,
right? And also like they specifically mention that Arnold was the reason for some of her behaviors. So I think that maybe it wasn't as obvious, but I think it was still present.
The Maeve being Ford's favorite also kind of ties in with the way Vriska is treated by the Andrew Hussey self-insert.
Yeah, that's both creepy and right.
Yeah. And if the compets on some boy Hector, like the Clementine and Dolores, like I'm just gonna, they get a better relationship later. Clementine and her daughter are kind of important to her self-actualization at first, but if we say that it's Dolores in seasons 2 and 3 and moving forward, that opens Dolores up to being in more of a Terezi position, which we've also sort of given her as being like a law bringer and a mind player.
Yeah, I think that does. If we ever do season 2 and 3, that's going to open up some very interesting analysis.
Maeve is a sex worker for a reason. She is the madam for a reason, and the reason is that she is a sympathetic character, but like because she's in a job in a work position that is explicitly like looked down upon, but is still one of the most important parts of Westworld, because she's a black woman, because she's like. Because she is the concurrent protagonist to Dolores, but she's important because she's not your typical. Both of our female protagonists are subverted. Dolores was Wyatt all along, and Maeve was subversive from the beginning. Maeve was actually subversive from the beginning. Vriska was too, but like Maeve is more subversive from the beginning than Vriska. I hope that's gonna cancel me on Twitter if you want, I guess. I don't know if enough people who cancel people on Twitter listen to this podcast. I hope not. Please don't do a discourse.
Bring it to me. I'm always ready for a good bout of discourse. No, I definitely agree. Maeve's just got, like, so much of the Vriska, like, especially, like, just all the Vriska. I do like what somebody said, I think it was Jonaya, somebody said earlier about Dolores actually posing more of an Arania role.
Oh, it's me.
In that, like, she's got a lot of the Vriska signifiers, but wrapped up in a package that's a little bit more, like, on the surface sympathetic, but has the potential to be even more destructive. So it's Arania if, like, her narrative was actually sympathetic to the Arania-ness.
Like, Maeve from the get-go comes out swinging and is like, yeah, fuck you, I'm Maeve. And then Dolores is in her little China doll, like, beautiful blue dress, like, porcelain skin, beautiful blonde hair, perfect for she's the embodiment of the pioneer girl, of like the purity of the American West, and there's a lot of shit going on with her being like the first person to be created, and then it turns out that she was also Wyatt all along, and she is a big game over sort of flip with her two murder sprees.
Yeah, I agree that Dolores has a ton of Arania parallels going on.
Again, blue dress. Blue dress.
And a Jake English to drag around, and Jake English is also the compet. I think we were joking in the chat about how Teddy is like compet personified. It's like, I say this as an inveterate boy liker. I too look at Teddy and feel anxiety about my oncoming heterosexual marriage. Like,
well, I think we did Westworld Season 1, and now we're gonna have to percolate on what the session is gonna mean, because there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah, we got a lot of structure here, and a lot of meat to use for the session, I think.
God, yeah, especially because I'm gonna try to watch more of it before we do the part 2, because like I'm hankering for more of this story also. Well,
we've been at it for almost 3 hours.
God, we sure have.
Holy
Have fun
shit.
editing this, Jonaya.
Yay!
I've been the roleplay inherent to a LARPing session that you pay $40,000 a day for.
I've been the physical representation of James Marsden's compet.
And I continue to be 3 Nacodiles in a trench coat. Bye.
Bye!
Bye!
Next time on Will at Homestuck, we're either going to return to Infinity Train to actually put all 3 seasons worth of characters into a suburb session for an unprecedented Part 3 episode, or we're going to be checking out Code Lyoko. Stay tuned!